The first time I realized I no longer belonged in my own family, it wasn't during a fight. It was during a wedding rehearsal. I was 32 years old, standing in the back of a candlelit vineyard in Northern California, holding a clipboard I hadn't volunteered to carry, watching my younger sister practice walking down the aisle, as if the entire world had been arranged for her comfort. The coordinator glanced at me, then back at her notes. "And you are?" she asked politely. Before I could answer, my mother stepped in. "She's just helping," she said quickly. "She's not part of the wedding party, just helping." I nodded, like it was normal. Like I hadn't been the one who helped plan this wedding from the first deposit to the final seating chart. Like I hadn't taken time off work, flown in early, paid for half the decorations when my sister went over budget. Like my name hadn't quietly disappeared. My sister Lauren didn't look at me. She was focused on her dress, her hair, her moment. My father stood beside her, smiling proudly, his arm around her fiancé like he was handing over a prized asset. I stood there, invisible, holding a clipboard, feeling something slip. That wasn't the betrayal. The betrayal came 2 hours later, when I found out why. It happened in the parking lot, after the rehearsal dinner. I was loading boxes into my rental car when my cousin Megan came up behind me, her voice low. "I didn't know," she said. "Didn't know what?" I asked. She hesitated. "That you weren't invited to the reception." I laughed once, a reflex. "What are you talking about? I'm literally organizing it." She bit her lip. "My mom got the seating chart today. Your name isn't on it. Neither is your +1. I stared at her. "There must be a mistake," I said automatically. Megan shook her head. I asked Aunt Carol. She said it was intentional. Something about space. Space. I thanked Megan, finished loading the boxes, and drove away without saying goodbye to anyone. I didn't cry. Not then. I drove to a quiet overlook above the vineyard, parked, and sat there with the engine off, the clipboard still on the passenger seat, like a prop from a life I no longer recognized. This was how it had always worked. Small exclusions, quiet edits, decisions made without me, then explained as practical, reasonable, for the good of the family. I was the older sister, the capable one, the one who didn't need much. That's what they told themselves. My name is Hannah Rowe. I'm 32 years old. I work as a senior project manager at a commercial development firm in Seattle. I pay my own mortgage. I haven't borrowed money from my parents since I was 19, and somehow, I was still expendable. The next morning, I went back to the vineyard early. Not to help, to retrieve my things. My mother found me in the bridal suite. "Hannah," she said, surprised. "You're up early." "I won't be staying," I replied. She frowned. "What do you mean?" "I'm not invited to the reception," I said calmly. Her face shifted. Not shock. Calculation. "We didn't think you'd mind," she said. "You understand how tight things are." "I paid for the flowers," I said. "That was your choice," she replied gently. "Lauren is under so much stress." I looked at her then. Really looked. This wasn't about money, or space, or stress. This was about hierarchy. "You didn't tell me," I said. She sighed. "We knew you'd make it difficult." I nodded slowly. "By existing?" She pressed her lips together. "This isn't the time." It never was. I walked out, collected my luggage, and left the vineyard without seeing my sister. I didn't leave a note. I didn't explain. For the first time, I stopped helping. 2 days later, I received an email from my father. Subject: "Let's not overreact." He wrote that families make compromises, that weddings are emotional, that Lauren needed support, not tension, that I should have been more flexible. He ended with, "We hope you'll still come to Christmas." That was the moment something clicked. This wasn't about a wedding. It was about a pattern that had followed me my entire life. Birthdays forgotten, promotions dismissed, sacrifices expected without acknowledgement, love offered conditionally, as long as I didn't inconvenience anyone else. And suddenly, I saw it clearly. I wasn't excluded by accident. I was managed out. I didn't reply to my father's email. Instead, I opened a folder on my laptop I hadn't touched in years. Old financial documents, family emails, notes I'd saved without knowing why, and buried among them was something I had never questioned before. A trust document. My grandmother's name was on it, and mine was crossed out. That was when I understood. The wedding was just the rehearsal. Whatever they had done, whatever they had taken, It had started long before Lauren ever put on a white dress, and I had just stopped playing my assigned role. I didn't know yet how far this would go, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. They thought I would swallow it. They were wrong. I didn't open the trust document right away. I stared at the file name for a long time, the way you stare at a door you're not sure you're ready to walk through. It was scanned, slightly crooked, dated 12 years earlier. The year my grandmother, Evelyn Rowe, moved into assisted living. The year my parents told me everything was handled. Back then I was 20, still believing that if something was important, someone would tell me. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, opened the file. It was a family trust, the Rowe Living Trust. Assets listed neatly. A small commercial property in Sacramento. 2 investment accounts, 1 life insurance policy. Nothing extravagant, but substantial enough to matter. The beneficiaries were listed in tiers. Primary, my parents, jointly. Secondary, my sister, Lauren. Tertiary, issue of the family. I scrolled. There was an addendum, signed 3 years later. My grandmother's health had already been declining by then. The handwriting was shaky, the signature inconsistent. That was where my name appeared, crossed out, initialed, replaced with Lauren's. I felt something cold move through me. Not anger, recognition. I had been erased legally long before the wedding ever happened. I pulled up old emails. There it was. A message from my father sent years ago that I had read and dismissed. We updated some estate details with Grandma. Nothing you need to worry about. I remembered that conversation now, standing in their kitchen, being told not to stress her, that it was complicated, that Lauren needed more support because she was sensitive. I closed my laptop. For the first time, I allowed myself to ask the question I'd never permit. What else had they decided for me without telling me? Over the next week, I didn't call anyone. I didn't confront. I didn't ask for explanations that would only be rewritten, I observed. I called the assisted living facility where my grandmother had lived, asked for records. They told me they could release them with proper authorization. I contacted the law firm listed on the trust document, left a message. Calm. Neutral. This is Hannah Rowe. I'm reviewing my grandmother, Evelyn Rowe's, estate planning documents. I have some questions. They called back the next morning. The attorney, Thomas Klein, sounded careful. Not evasive, just cautious. I remember your grandmother, he said. Very particular. Very clear about her intentions. That sentence stopped me. Can you explain the addendum? I asked. There was a pause. Paper shifting. It was requested by your parents, he said slowly. They brought it in. Said your grandmother wanted adjustments. Did you speak to her directly? I asked. Another pause. No, he said. She wasn't present. My fingers tightened around the phone. So you changed a trust without confirming with the grantor? I asked. At the time, he replied, choosing his words. They were acting under a durable power of attorney. I closed my eyes. Who drafted that power of attorney? I asked. Your father, he said. Years earlier. I thanked him and hung up. I didn't feel shocked. I felt oriented, like someone had finally turned the lights on in a room I've been navigating by muscle memory. I thought about my grandmother, how she used to slip me cash when my parents weren't looking, how she'd asked, more than once, if I was saving, if I was protected. I had thought it was just her way. It wasn't. That afternoon, my sister called. Hannah, she said brightly. Mom says you left early. I did, I replied. There was a beat. You made things awkward. I wasn't invited, I said. She exhaled sharply. This again. I waited. You know how Mom is, she continued. She just wanted everything to be perfect. For you, I said. That's not fair, she replied immediately. Isn't it? I asked. Silence. Then, softer. Why are you doing this now? That question mattered. Because I finally noticed, I said. And because you didn't think I would. She laughed nervously. You're reading too much into things. I've read enough, I replied. Hannah, she said, impatience creeping in. Don't turn this into a legal thing. It's family. There it was. The phrase they used whenever rules didn't apply to them. I'll talk to you later, I said, and ended the call. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Not because things were resolved, but because they were finally real. The next day, I met with a lawyer of my own, not a family friend, not a referral. Someone whose only obligation was to the truth as it existed on paper. Her name was Dana Walsh, early 40s, direct, no patience for sentimentality. She reviewed the documents quietly. "This is messy," she said finally, "but not uncommon." "Is it legal?" I asked. She tilted her head. "That depends on what can be proven. Capacity, intent, undue influence." I nodded. "What about exclusion?" She looked at me. "That's the easiest part." I felt my pulse quicken. "Explain." "You were intentionally removed," she said. "Not forgotten, not omitted. Removed." She slid the papers back to me. "The wedding was just theater." That word again. "Hierarchy. Do you want to challenge it?" she asked. I didn't answer immediately, because this wasn't just about money, or a trust, or even revenge. This was about a lifetime of being quietly sidelined and told it was love. "I want to understand the full scope," I said finally, "before I decide anything." She smiled slightly. "Good. That's how people who win think." As I left her office, my phone buzzed again. A text from my mother. "Lauren is devastated. I hope you're not trying to punish her." I didn't reply, because for the first time, I wasn't reacting to their narrative. I was building my own. And somewhere between a wedding seating chart and a crossed-out name on a trust, I had crossed a line of my own. I wasn't helping anymore. I was paying attention. And that was going to cost them far more than they realized. Once you start looking, the past rearranges itself. Moments you dismissed as misunderstandings line up into a pattern. Conversations you forgot take on weight. Silence becomes evidence. Dana asked me to write a timeline. Not feelings, facts, dates, documents, who said what, who signed what, who benefited. I spent an entire weekend doing it. Receipts from college, emails about temporary help, notes from my grandmother written in a careful cursive that had faded toward the end of her life. One postcard she'd sent me, tucked into a book, with a sentence that made my stomach tighten. "Make sure you always have something that's just yours." I realized then that she had been warning me. I just hadn't known how to listen. On Monday morning, Dana called. "I pulled the medical records," she said. "Your grandmother's cognitive assessments don't support the changes made to the trust." "So it wasn't legal," I said. "It was convenient," she replied. "There's a difference." She paused. "There's more." I closed my office door. "Tell me." "The Sacramento property," she said. "It was sold 6 years ago." My heart dropped. "I thought it was still in the trust." "It was," she said, "until your parents petitioned the court to liquidate it for care expenses." "That's not true," I said immediately. "Her care was already prepaid." "Yes," Dana replied, "which is why the money didn't go to the facility." I didn't speak. "It went to a joint account," she continued, "in your parents' names." I felt the room tilt slightly, the way it does when something you suspected becomes confirmed. "How much?" I asked. $320,000, she said. Net. I thanked her and hung up. I didn't cry. I went to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. 32. Competent. Calm. And suddenly, very done. That evening, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. Then he texted, "We need to talk. This is getting out of hand." I almost laughed. Out of hand. As if the situation had slipped accidentally, not been engineered carefully over years. I didn't respond. Instead, I called my Aunt Judith, my mother's older sister, the one who had always watched quietly, the one who never intervened, but never lied outright either. She answered on the second ring. "Hannah," she said softly, "I wondered when you'd call." That told me everything. "I'm not calling for reassurance," I said. "I'm calling for information." She exhaled slowly. "What do you know?" "Enough," I replied. "But not everything." There was a pause. Then she spoke. "Your mother was afraid," Judith said, "after your grandmother fell. Afraid of losing control. Afraid that money would complicate things." "Complicate what?" I asked. "Lauren's life," she said. "Her plans, her expectations." I closed my eyes. "She justified it as protection," Judith continued. "She said you'd be fine, that you always landed on your feet." That phrase again, "you'll be fine." I wasn't asked, I said. No, Judith agreed. You weren't. Did Grandma know? I asked. Judith hesitated. She suspected. But by the time she was sure, she didn't have the strength to fight. I thanked her and ended the call. I sat in my living room as the light faded, thinking about how often love is confused with management. How many times decisions are made for someone's own good without their consent. I thought about the wedding again. The clipboard, the missing chair, the way my role had shifted from sister to staff without a conversation. It wasn't personal. It was procedural. They had practiced this. The next morning, Dana and I met again. We can file, she said. Challenge the trust, the property sale, the power of attorney. What does that look like? I asked. Discovery, she replied. Depositions, financial forensics, time, and cost, I said. Yes, she agreed. Emotionally and otherwise. I nodded. What's the leverage? She smiled slightly. They won't want this public. That mattered. My parents' entire sense of authority came from appearance, from being seen as stable, respectable, in control. This would disrupt that. But disruption wasn't my goal. Clarity was. I want to proceed, I said, but slowly. Dana nodded. That's wise. That afternoon, my sister emailed me. Not a call, an email. Subject: can we please be adults about this? She wrote about stress, about misunderstandings, about how hard it was to plan a wedding and deal with family drama. She said she felt attacked. She said she hoped I wasn't trying to punish anyone. She ended with, I know you don't need the money, Hannah. You've always been independent. There it was, the favor I never asked for. Independence, used as justification for exclusion. I replied with one sentence. Independence doesn't mean consent. Then I stopped. No more explaining. No more defending. Dana filed the initial request 2 days later. Not a lawsuit. A formal demand for accounting. Just paperwork. But paperwork has a way of shaking foundations. Within hours, my mother called. Hannah, she said, voice tight. Why are you doing this? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I'm asking for transparency, I said. This is tearing the family apart, she replied. No, I said. What you did already did that. I just stopped pretending, she cried. I waited. You're punishing us, she said finally. I chose my words carefully. I'm refusing to be managed anymore. She hung up. That night, I received a message from Lauren. You're ruining my marriage before it even starts. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, I turned off my phone. Because for the first time, I understood something clearly. They believed my silence was loyalty. They believed my competence was compliance. They believed I would always choose peace over truth. They were wrong, and the next steps would make that undeniable. The demand letter didn't accuse anyone of wrongdoing. That was the part my parents didn't understand. It asked for records, accounting statements, copies of the power of attorney, documentation supporting the trust amendment and the sale of the Sacramento property. Neutral language, legal tone, no emotion, which made it impossible to argue with. They responded within 48 hours. Not with documents, with pressure. My mother showed up at my apartment unannounced on a Thursday evening, standing in the hallway, like she still had the right to cross the threshold without asking. Hannah, she said, already crying, please don't do this. I didn't invite her in. We can talk here, I said. She glanced down the hallway, uncomfortable. This is humiliating. That word again. Not wrong. Not unfair. Humiliating. What do you want? I asked. She took a breath. Your father is furious. Lauren hasn't slept. People are asking questions. About what? I asked calmly. She hesitated. The letter. So you received it, I said. Yes, she snapped, then softened. We thought you trusted us. I looked at her. The woman who had taught me to say please and thank you, to keep my voice low, to never embarrass the family. I did, I said. That's why this hurts. She flinched. We did what we thought was best, she said. You were always capable. Lauren needed support. Support isn't theft, I replied. Her eyes hardened. That's a cruel word. It's a precise one, I said. She shook her head. If you proceed, this will get ugly. I nodded. I know. She lowered her voice. Your father will cut you off completely. I almost smiled. I already am, I said. She stared at me, as if that possibility had never occurred to her. "I'm not threatening you," she said. "I'm warning you." "I'm not afraid," I replied. That was the truth. Fear had kept me compliant for years. Fear of being difficult, fear of being ungrateful, fear of being excluded. That fear had already come true. There was nothing left to lose. She left without another word. The next day, Dana forwarded me an email from my parents' attorney. They requested a delay, claimed records were being gathered, asked if we could resolve this amicably. Dana called me immediately. "They're stalling," she said. "Good," I replied. "It gives them time to make mistakes." She laughed softly. "You're adapting quickly." "I'm tired of being surprised," I said. Over the next 2 weeks, small things began to surface. A bank account that hadn't been disclosed. A transaction labeled as reimbursement that didn't match any expense. Emails between my parents and the original attorney discussing urgency. None of it was definitive on its own. Together, it told a story. Dana brought in a forensic accountant named Victor Hale. Late 40s, methodical, barely spoke unless necessary. He reviewed the documents in silence, occasionally making notes. Finally, he looked up. "This wasn't sloppy," he said. "It was intentional." I nodded. "They assumed no one would question it," he continued, "because questioning it would disrupt the family narrative." That landed. Disruption. I had spent my life smoothing edges, absorbing discomfort so others didn't have to feel it. The moment I stopped, the system began to strain. Lauren tried again. This time, she showed up with my father. They came together, like a united front, standing outside my apartment door, as if they were staging an intervention. I didn't invite them in. "Hannah," my father said, voice controlled, "this has gone far enough." "I disagree," I replied. "This could destroy everything," he said. "Our reputation, our stability." "You should have thought about that earlier," I said. Lauren crossed her arms. "You're being dramatic." I looked at her. "You were comfortable being dramatic when it benefited you." She scoffed. "I didn't ask for any of this." "You accepted it," I said. My father stepped forward. "We're willing to make concessions." I waited. "We can adjust the trust," he said. "Include you again. Quietly." Quietly. There it was. "Only if I stop asking questions," I said. "Yes," he said. "That's reasonable." I shook my head. "No." Lauren's voice sharpened. "Why are you doing this? You're not even close to Grandma." I was. I met her gaze. Closeness isn't proven by proximity. It's proven by honesty. She looked away. My father sighed, the way he always did when he believed he was being patient. "If you proceed," he said, "you'll force us to defend ourselves." "I'm not attacking you," I said. "I'm asking for the truth." He stared at me, then nodded slowly. "Then don't expect forgiveness," he said. I answered without hesitation. "I didn't ask for it." They left. That night, Dana emailed me an update. The court had approved the request for full accounting. A hearing date was set. Discovery was mandatory. The process was no longer optional. I sat on my couch, laptop open, lights off, and felt something settle. Not triumph, resolve. The escalation wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was procedural. And that was what made it powerful. They had spent years controlling the story, through silence, implication, and emotional leverage. Now the story would be told through documents, timelines, and sworn statements. They couldn't manage that, because paper doesn't care who cries. And the silence they depended on had finally stopped working. The notice arrived in the mail on a Monday morning. Cream-colored envelope, court seal in the corner. The kind of letter people imagine belongs to other families. Hearing, date set. I didn't open it right away. I already knew what it would say. Dana had warned me the night before. They didn't respond fully, she'd said. The judge approved compulsory discovery. Compulsory. That word mattered. Because until now, everything had been voluntary, polite, negotiable. They could stall, posture, appeal to emotion. Now, they had deadlines. I opened the letter, read it once, and placed it neatly back on the table. Then I went to work. Not because I needed the distraction, but because routine reminded me that my life existed beyond their panic. By Wednesday, the tone shifted. My father's emails became longer, less certain. He CC'd lawyers, then removed them, then added them back. One message stood out. "This is spiraling faster than anyone expected." Let's pause before permanent damage is done. Permanent damage. As if what they had done to me had been temporary. Dana advised me not to respond. Silence is doing more work for you than any argument, she said. She was right. The documents began arriving in batches. Bank statements, trust amendments, power of attorney filings, sale records for the Sacramento property, internal emails from the law firm, medical records attached as justification. Victor, the forensic accountant, built timelines on a whiteboard in his office. Lines intersecting, dates stacking, names repeating. He didn't editorialize. He didn't need to. One afternoon, he pointed at a cluster of transactions. This is where intent becomes visible, he said. They didn't just move money. They moved it to protect Lauren. I watched as he traced the flow. Sale proceeds diverted. Accounts consolidated, trust language revised, all within a narrow window of time. A plan. Lauren called me that night, not angry, not defensive, afraid. Hannah, she said softly, they're talking about the hearing like it's a disaster. I didn't respond. I didn't know all of it, she continued. I swear. You knew enough, I replied. She sniffed. They said you'd be fine. That phrase again. I was, I said. Until I wasn't. There was a pause. Can we talk in person? No, I said gently. You're really going through with this, she said. Yes, I replied. For money? She asked. I closed my eyes briefly. For agency. She didn't understand. Not yet. The week before the hearing, my mother sent a letter. Not an email. A handwritten letter, delivered by mail like it carried weight. She wrote about family, about sacrifice, about how she had always tried to protect everyone. She wrote about my grandmother's decline, about fear, about not knowing what else to do. She didn't apologize. She asked me to reconsider. I placed the letter in a drawer, not as evidence, as closure. The hearing itself was quiet. No courtroom drama, no raised voices. Just a judge, a clerk, 2 attorneys, and stacks of paper. Dana presented the timeline calmly. Victor explained the financial flow. The judge asked pointed questions. My parents' attorney stumbled over explanations that didn't align with the documents. When my father was asked directly whether my grandmother had requested the trust amendment, he hesitated, then said, she would have wanted it that way. The judge looked at him steadily. That's not what I asked, she said. Silence filled the room. Lauren sat behind them, hands clenched in her lap. My mother stared straight ahead, jaw tight. I was asked to speak briefly. I stood. I'm not here because of a wedding, I said, or because I feel excluded. I'm here because decisions were made on my behalf without my consent and then hidden from me. I'm asking the court to acknowledge that. That was all. The judge nodded. I will review the filings, she said. In the meantime, all assets in question are frozen. Frozen. I felt my mother's breath catch. The hearing ended without a ruling. That would come later, but the damage was already done. Outside the courthouse, my father tried to speak to me. Hannah, he said, you didn't have to go this far. I met his eyes. You went there first. My mother reached for my arm. I stepped back. Please, she said, we can fix this. I shook my head. You can't fix something you still don't admit breaking. They watched as I walked away. Not victorious. Free. That evening, Dana called. They're exposed, she said. The court sees it. What happens next? I asked. Now, she replied, they start losing control. I sat on my couch as the city lights came on, thinking about the little girl I'd been. The one who believed fairness was automatic, that love meant inclusion. I knew better now. This wasn't revenge. It was consequence. And for the first time, the weight of it wasn't on my shoulders alone. The silence they had relied on for decades had finally been replaced by a record. And records don't forget. The freeze hit them faster than I expected. Within 48 hours, my father called Dana's office twice. My mother emailed 3 times. Their attorney requested an urgent discussion about interim resolutions. Control had slipped. And when people who rely on control lose it, they panic. I didn't. That difference mattered. Dana updated me in measured tones. They can't access several accounts. The trust distributions are paused. The sale proceeds are flagged. So their cash flow is disrupted, I said. Yes, she replied. And so is their narrative. That second part was more important. For years, my parents had been able to tell a clean story. Responsible caretakers, devoted parents, a united family. Any friction was framed as misunderstanding, emotion, stress. Now there was a public docket. Facts don't bend for tone. At work, I kept my routine. Meetings, deadlines, deliverables. No one there knew what was unfolding, and I liked it that way. The separation reminded me that my identity wasn't tethered to the crisis they had created. One afternoon, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't saved. It was my Uncle Mark, my father's younger brother. "Hannah," he said carefully, "your dad's not doing well." I waited. "He didn't expect this," Mark continued. "None of us did." "That's the problem," I replied. There was a pause. "You're making this very public." "I didn't," I said. "The documents did." Mark sighed. "Your parents are scared. They should be," I said quietly. He didn't argue. That weekend, I met Dana to prepare for the next phase. Depositions. "They'll try to rewrite history," she said. "Minimize, reframe, claim misunderstanding." "I know," I replied. "What do you want from this?" she asked. Not as a lawyer, but as a person. I thought for a moment. "I want acknowledgement," I said. "Not apologies. Not money alone. I want the record to reflect what happened." She nodded. "That's reasonable." The first deposition was my father's. He sat stiffly across the table, hands folded, eyes avoiding mine. His attorney guided him gently, but the questions were precise. When asked about the power of attorney, he spoke confidently. About acting in my grandmother's best interests, about urgency, about protecting the family. When asked why I wasn't informed, he hesitated. "I didn't think it was necessary," he said. "Why?" Dana asked. He glanced at his attorney. "Hannah has always been independent." There it was again. Independence as erasure. "Did she consent?" Dana asked. "No," he said. "Did you inform her afterward?" "No." "Why not?" He shifted in his seat. "It would have upset her." I wrote that down. Upset her. That was the justification. The next deposition was my mother's. She cried early, recounted stress, fear, the burden of caring for my grandmother. She spoke of sacrifice, of doing her best. Dana listened patiently, then asked, "Did you ever consider asking Hannah?" My mother dabbed her eyes. She didn't need the burden. "And did Lauren?" Dana asked. Silence. "I was trying to keep the peace," my mother said finally. "At whose expense?" Dana asked. She didn't answer. Lauren's deposition came last. She was defensive, less polished. Her answers contradicted my parents on timelines and awareness. When asked if she benefited from the trust changes, she said yes. When asked if she questioned them, she said no. "I trusted my parents," she said. So did I thought. Afterward, Dana and I reviewed transcripts. "They're inconsistent," she said. "That helps." "Does it change the outcome?" I asked. She leaned back. "It strengthens your position, especially if we move toward mediation or trial." Trial. The word hung between us. "Do they?" "Yes," she replied. Quietly. I smiled faintly. "Of course they do." A week later, my parents made an offer. A revised trust, partial restitution, a confidentiality clause. Dana slid the proposal across the table. "They want you back in," she said, "but on their terms." I read it carefully. They would restore my beneficiary status, allocate funds retroactively, though less than the original value. In exchange, I would withdraw the challenge and agree not to discuss the matter publicly. They wanted silence back. "No," I said. Dana raised an eyebrow. "You're sure?" "Yes," I replied. They don't get to buy my quiet anymore. That decision traveled fast. Within days, extended family members reached out. Some supportive, some cautious, some asking me to consider the bigger picture. I responded to none of them. The bigger picture had always excluded me. The pressure escalated. My mother left a voicemail late one night. "You've made your point," she said. "Please stop before you destroy what's left." I deleted it. Not out of cruelty, out of clarity. The truth was already doing its work. I didn't need to push harder. I just needed to keep standing where I was. The system they built relied on one thing: my willingness to step aside. And that was something I would never do again. The next hearing date was set. And this time, the court wouldn't just be freezing assets. It would be deciding who had the right to control them. For the first time in my life, the question of power wasn't rhetorical. It was legal, and I was ready to answer it. The mediation was scheduled for a Friday. Neutral building, neutral room, neutral language, designed to soften outcomes that rarely feel neutral to the people inside them. Dana warned me beforehand. This is where they'll try to make it emotional. I nodded. That won't work anymore. My parents arrived together. They always did. A united front, carefully rehearsed. My father carried a leather folder, like it still meant authority. My mother wore the same pearl earrings she'd worn to every major family event since I was a child. Lauren came separately. She sat 2 chairs away from them, arms crossed, jaw tight. She didn't look at me. The mediator introduced himself, reviewed the process, reminded everyone that the goal was resolution. I understood what he meant. They wanted this to end quietly. The opening statements were predictable. Their attorney spoke about misunderstanding, about stress during my grandmother's decline, about good intentions gone wrong. He emphasized that I was successful, stable, independent, that no lasting harm had been intended. Dana spoke next. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize. She laid out facts. Dates, documents, decisions made without consent, assets diverted, silence maintained deliberately. A pattern of exclusion justified as protection. When she finished, the room was very still. The mediator turned to my parents. Would you like to respond? My father cleared his throat. We never meant to hurt Hannah. I met his eyes for the first time that day. You never meant to include me, I said calmly. The mediator raised a hand. Let's keep responses directed through me. I nodded. Of course. My mother leaned forward. Hannah, please. This isn't who you are. I felt something settle in my chest. This is exactly who I am, I said. You just never benefited from it before. Lauren laughed sharply. You're acting like a victim. I turned to her. You lived in a house funded by money I didn't know existed. That's not fair, she snapped. No, I said. It's accurate. The mediator intervened. Let's take a break. They separated us into different rooms. Dana sat beside me, reviewing notes. They're unraveling, she said quietly. I know, I replied. In the other room, my parents were arguing. I could hear raised voices through the wall. My mother crying, my father insisting they needed to hold firm. Lauren left the room entirely. When we reconvened, the tone had changed. Their attorney spoke again. This time, he offered more. Full restoration of my share. Interest. Legal fees covered. No admission of wrongdoing, but no confidentiality clause. It was generous. It was late. Dana leaned toward me. This is likely the best financial outcome. I nodded. I know. The mediator looked at me expectantly. Ms. Rowe, I took a breath. I'm not here for money, I said. I'm here for acknowledgement. My father stiffened. I want the court record to reflect that decisions were made without my consent, I continued. That I was intentionally excluded. That silence was used as leverage. That's unnecessary, my father said sharply. It's essential, I replied. The mediator frowned slightly. That may complicate resolution. It already is, I said. Lauren stood abruptly. You're doing this to punish us. I looked at her. Really looked. No, I said. I'm doing this to end it. She shook her head, eyes bright with anger. You always had to be right. I didn't respond. Dana placed a hand on my arm. If we proceed to trial, she said quietly, this will become public. I nodded. Good. The word landed hard. My mother covered her mouth. You wouldn't. I already am, I said. The mediator called a session. No agreement. Outside, my father followed me into the hallway. Hannah, he said, if you do this, there's no coming back. I stopped walking. There was never a place to come back to, I said. He stared at me, truly seeing me for the first time. Not as the reasonable one. Not as the helper. Not as the backup plan. As a boundary. Lauren didn't follow. She stayed behind with my parents, the golden child, suddenly uncertain what gold was worth when the system that produced it began to collapse. That night, Dana emailed me. Trial scheduled. Discovery complete. The record would be entered. I sat. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they're just control structures, disguised as love. And sometimes they break. Not from anger. From truth. The next chapter wouldn't be about negotiation. It would be about consequence, and there would be no mediator left to soften it. Trials don't feel like television. There's no swelling music, no dramatic pauses timed for effect, just fluorescent lights, stiff chairs, and the quiet certainty that every word will be recorded exactly as spoken. That precision unnerved them. I could see it on my father's face as we took our seats. He had built his authority on tone, implication, and the ability to steer conversations before they reached uncomfortable places. None of that mattered here. The court didn't care how reasonable he sounded. It cared what he did. Dana opened with a clear statement of facts. No adjectives, no emotional framing. Just a timeline that showed how authority had been consolidated, assets redirected, and my consent deliberately bypassed. She used the phrase pattern of conduct. That phrase stuck. My parents' attorney tried to counter with character. He talked about decades of caregiving, about family harmony, about difficult decisions made under pressure. The judge listened, took notes, asked questions. When Victor testified, the room changed. He walked the court through the financial flow, step by step. The sale of the Sacramento property, the timing, the destination of funds, the absence of documented care expenses to justify the liquidation. This was not reactive, he said calmly. It was premeditated. My mother's shoulders slumped slightly. Lauren was called next. She looked smaller under oath, less certain. She was asked whether she knew about the trust changes. Yes, she said. When? Before the wedding, she admitted. Whether she questioned them? No. Whether she benefited? Yes. Whether she ever informed me? No. Her voice cracked on that last answer. My father was last. He spoke confidently at first, about family responsibility, about shielding me from stress, about doing what was necessary. Then Dana asked a single question. Did you believe Hannah would challenge your decisions? He hesitated. No, he said finally. Why not? Dana asked. He glanced at me, then away. Because she never had before. That was the moment. Not dramatic, not loud, just a truth, spoken plainly. I felt something release inside me, a tension I hadn't realized I was still carrying. The judge recessed shortly after. When she returned, the ruling was measured. She found that the trust amendment had been executed under questionable authority, that the power of attorney had been used beyond its intended scope, that the sale of the property lacked sufficient justification. She ordered restitution, full, with interest. She also ordered the trust to be restructured under court supervision. And then she said something that wasn't required, but mattered. Silence does not equal consent, she said, especially within families where power is uneven. My mother began to cry. My father stared straight ahead. Lauren looked at me once, just once, her expression unreadable. I didn't look back. Outside the courtroom, reporters waited. Not many, just enough. Dana shielded me as we walked past. No comment, she said firmly. I didn't need to say anything. The record spoke. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment. No celebration, no relief. Just a deep, quiet stillness. I had won. But winning wasn't the feeling I'd expected. What I felt was finality. The system that had managed me, minimized me, relied on my silence, was gone. Not repaired, not reformed, gone. My phone buzzed once, a text from Lauren. I didn't think it would go this far. I stared at it for a long time. Then I turned the phone face down. Some realizations come too late to matter, and some apologies are just another attempt to regain balance. I wasn't interested in balance anymore. I was interested in truth, and the truth had finally been entered into the record, where it would stay. The next chapter wouldn't be about them reacting. It would be about me deciding what to do with the power I had reclaimed, because reclaiming it was only the beginning. What came next would determine everything. The check arrived 3 weeks later. Certified. Official. Quiet. No letter attached. No explanation. Just numbers printed cleanly on paper, representing years of decisions made without me, now reversed by a process that did not care about intention or tone. Dana called to confirm receipt. You're fully restored, she said. The trust is now under independent administration. You have equal authority. Thank you, I replied. She paused. What will you do? I looked at the check on my kitchen table. I'll decide, I said. That was the difference. I didn't rush. I didn't announce anything. I didn't call my parents or my sister to inform them of my next move. I let the quiet stretch. Power, I was learning, didn't need to be displayed. It needed to be used deliberately. Over the next month, I met with advisors, financial planners, estate attorneys, people who had no emotional investment in my family history. They spoke in terms of risk, structure, insulation. Separate yourself, one advised. Legally, cleanly. I followed that advice. I transferred my portion of the trust into a new entity. Independent governance, clear rules, no ambiguity. When the documents were finalized, Dana reviewed them one last time. "This is airtight," she said. "No one can override you again." That mattered more than the money itself. Meanwhile, my parents went quiet. No calls, no messages, no attempts at reconciliation. Their silence was different now. Not strategic, not controlling, resigned. Lauren reached out again. This time, it wasn't defensive. "I don't know who I am without them managing everything," she wrote. I read it twice, then replied, "That's something you'll need to figure out on your own." She didn't respond. I didn't expect her to. Around that time, something unexpected happened. My Aunt Judith invited me to lunch. We met at a small cafe halfway between our cities. She looked older, tired in a way I hadn't noticed before. "I should have said something," she said after we sat down. "You didn't," I replied gently. "I was afraid," she admitted. "Your mother is persuasive." I nodded. "But I'm proud of you," she said. "You did what the rest of us wouldn't." I accepted that, not as praise, as fact. At work, my focus sharpened. Projects moved faster, decisions felt lighter. Not because my responsibilities had changed, but because the background noise was gone. I wasn't waiting for approval anymore. One evening, I received an email from my father. Subject: closure. It was brief. He wrote that he hoped time would soften things, that he believed, despite everything, that family mattered, that he wished me well. No apology, no accountability, just distance, framed as dignity. I didn't reply. Because closure isn't something someone else gives you. It's something you claim. I thought about the wedding again. The clipboard, the missing chair, the quiet removal. It felt like another lifetime. The truth was, I didn't need to prove anything anymore. The system that had relied on my silence had already collapsed. What mattered now was how I chose to live with the clarity I'd earned. I made one final decision. I resigned from my job, not because I was unhappy, because I wanted to redirect. I took a consulting role that allowed me to work with organizations navigating internal power imbalances, family-owned firms, succession disputes, governance breakdowns. I understood those dynamics intimately, and I knew how dangerous silence could be. The work felt right, not vengeful, not corrective, purposeful. One afternoon, as I wrapped up a call, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked different, not harder, not colder, clearer. Power didn't feel like dominance. It felt like choice. And I was finally choosing myself, not as a reaction, but as a standard. The story wasn't over, but it no longer revolved around them. The final chapters would be about what happens after the tables turn. When the person who was managed learns how to manage their own life without asking permission. Power shifts rarely go uncontested. Just when I thought the dust had settled, they tried one final maneuver. It came disguised as concern. My father's name appeared on my phone one afternoon, weeks after his email about closure. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail instead. "Hannah," he said, voice measured, almost gentle. "We've been advised to revisit some family matters. There are implications. I think it would be wise for you to attend a meeting." A meeting, not a conversation, not an apology. A meeting. Dana listened to the voicemail twice when I forwarded it to her. "They're trying to regain footing," she said. "Probably through extended family or reputational pressure." She was right. Within days, messages trickled in. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, family friends, even the pastor from my parents' church, all variations of the same theme. "Let's talk. This has gone far enough. Family shouldn't air its business." I declined them all. Then the real attempt arrived, a notice of intent to challenge the trust restructure. Frivolous, weak, but strategic. "They're hoping to exhaust you," Dana said. "Make you settle just to make it stop." I nodded. "We won't." The challenge was dismissed, within weeks. And with it, the last lever snapped. The call, they had nothing left to pull. That's when I understood something crucial. Control doesn't end when you confront it. It ends when it stops working. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt finished. I spent Thanksgiving alone that year. By choice. I cooked something simple, opened a bottle of wine, watched the city lights come on through my windows. There was no ache, just quiet. And in that quiet, something settled. Permanently. I no longer needed their acknowledgement to validate my experience. The story they had told about me had lost its power because I had stopped listening. In December, I signed the final paperwork dissolving all shared legal ties. No joint trusteeship, no future obligations, clean lines. When the documents were filed, Dana shook my hand. "You handled this with more restraint than most," she said. "I wasn't trying to win," I replied. "I was trying to be done." She smiled. "That's usually how people actually win." That night, I slept deeply, without dreams, without tension. The past no longer felt like something chasing me. It felt archived. And that made space for what came next. The final chapter wouldn't be about them trying again. It would be about what happens when there is nothing left to resist. When the silence you once feared becomes the peace you chose. And when the person who was once excluded realizes that exclusion, sometimes, is the beginning of freedom. When the noise finally stopped, I noticed something unexpected. I had room to think. Not the kind of thinking that circles a problem endlessly, trying to anticipate reactions, trying to soften outcomes before they happen. This was quieter, slower. It came from a place that wasn't braced for impact. The first thing I did with that space was nothing. For weeks, I kept my calendar light. I worked. I slept. I walked the city without headphones. I let my mind wander without steering it back toward old conversations or imagined arguments that no longer mattered. That was new. For most of my adult life, I'd been mentally negotiating, replaying family dynamics, editing myself in advance, preparing for disappointment before it arrived. Now there was nothing to prepare for. The consulting work grew steadily. Word traveled in small, deliberate circles. Family-owned companies, second-generation businesses, situations where authority had calcified around tradition, and no one wanted to be the first to name it. I became very good at recognizing the moment when someone realized they weren't being consulted, only managed. It always looked the same: a pause, a shift in posture, a sudden clarity that came with discomfort. I didn't push. I didn't moralize. I just explained what I had learned. The hard way. Silence doesn't protect relationships. It protects imbalance. That work grounded me. It gave shape to what I'd been through without turning it into spectacle or revenge. I wasn't telling my story. I was using it. In February, something else happened. I received a letter from the independent trustee overseeing the restructured trust. Formal language, annual review, options moving forward. I read it carefully. Then I made a decision I hadn't anticipated. I reduced my involvement. I kept what was legally mine, but I stepped back from active oversight. I redirected distributions into a foundation focused on legal literacy for women navigating family-controlled assets. Not loudly, not publicly, quietly. It felt right. Power, I'd learned, wasn't about holding everything tightly. It was about choosing where to apply pressure and where to let go. I didn't inform my parents. They would find out eventually, or they wouldn't. It didn't matter. One afternoon in early spring, I ran into Lauren by accident. A bookstore. Small, independent. The kind of place we'd grown up visiting with our grandmother. She froze when she saw me. Then she walked over. "You look different," she said. "So do you," I replied. She nodded. I moved out. That surprised me. "From their house," she clarified. I needed space. I waited. "They're not the same," she said. "Without the money, without the structure, without you." I didn't respond. "I don't know who I am without them directing everything," she admitted. I met her eyes. "That's not something I can solve for you." "I know," she said. "I just wanted you to know I see it now." I considered her words. "Seeing isn't the same as changing," I said gently. She nodded. "I know." We stood there for a moment, surrounded by shelves of books neither of us picked up. "I hope you find what you're looking for," she said finally. "So do you," I replied. We walked away in opposite directions. I didn't feel relief. I felt completion. That summer, I took a month off. No work, no plans, just travel. Quiet towns, long meals eaten alone without apology. In a small coastal city, sitting on a bench overlooking the water, I realized something that stopped me mid-thought. I no longer missed the family I wished I had. That grief had burned itself out. What remained was neutral, clean, uncharged. The final illusion had dissolved. Love that requires erasure isn't love. It's control, wearing a familiar face. I returned home lighter than I'd left. Not healed in the dramatic sense, integrated. The last email from my parents came sometime in August. A brief update. Health issues. Logistics. No requests. No blame. I read it once, then archived it. Not deleted. Archived. Because it no longer defined anything. The life I was living now didn't exist in reaction to them. It existed on its own terms. And that was the point. The final chapter wouldn't be about what they lost. It would be about what I refused to lose again. My voice, my boundaries, my right to choose myself without justification. That story was finished. What came next was entirely mine. The ending didn't arrive with a message. It arrived with a feeling. I was standing in my kitchen on an ordinary morning, coffee cooling on the counter, sunlight cutting across the floor, when it occurred to me that I hadn't thought about my parents in days. Not defensively, not reflexively, not even with distance. They simply hadn't crossed my mind. That was when I knew it was over. Not the legal part. That had ended months ago. Not the conflict. That had burned itself out once it stopped producing leverage. What ended was the internal negotiation, the quiet habit of asking myself how a decision would be received by people who had never asked how it affected me. I didn't announce that shift. I didn't ritualize it. I just noticed it, acknowledged it, and let it stand. A few weeks later, the final paperwork arrived from the trustee. Annual reconciliation, confirmation of distributions, clean language, no references to family roles, just names, numbers, and clarity. I signed electronically. That was it. No hesitation, no weight in my chest. No sense of finality dramatized into something larger than it was. I didn't feel victorious. I felt aligned. That night, I went for a long walk through my neighborhood. The air was cool. Windows glowed softly behind curtains. Other people's lives unfolding in ways I would never see or understand. For years, I had believed that choosing myself would cost me everything. Family, belonging, history. What it actually cost me was illusion. The illusion that love should hurt. The illusion that silence is strength. The illusion that being easy is the same as being valued. I stopped walking and stood under a streetlight, thinking about my grandmother, about the way she used to watch quietly, how she noticed things no one else bothered to see, how she tried, in her limited way, to protect me without creating open war. She hadn't failed. She had planted something. It just took time to grow. The revenge, if anyone wants to call it that, was never loud. There were no raised voices, no dramatic ultimatums, no moment where I stood over anyone demanding acknowledgement. What I did instead was far more permanent. I removed my consent. I refused to be managed, minimized, or edited for the comfort of people who benefited from my silence. I let the system collapse under the weight of its own assumptions. And when it did, I didn't rush in to replace it. I walked away. That's the part people don't always understand. The strongest move isn't exposure. It isn't confrontation. It isn't punishment. It's disengagement backed by truth. If you're listening to this and you recognize yourself somewhere in it, hear this clearly. You are not difficult for wanting clarity. You are not selfish for asking where you stand. You are not disloyal for refusing to disappear. Family is not defined by who has access to you. It's defined by who respects your boundaries when access is no longer guaranteed. I didn't burn bridges. I stopped crossing ones that were never built to hold me. And on the other side of that decision was a life that didn't require justification. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like it, leave a comment, or share it with someone who might need it. And if you want more stories about family drama, betrayal, quiet revenge, and the kind of justice that doesn't fade, Make sure you subscribe, because sometimes the most powerful ending isn't a confrontation. It's choosing yourself once and never negotiating that choice again.